On this episode of Treasure Expeditions, I stop into the Castle Rock Museum to hear some ghost stories, and I attend a fall festival. Museum Director Angie DeLeo tells us more about the haunted happenings.
We have a little bit of story about this building itself, the Railroad Depot, which was built in 1875, now the Castle Rock Museum. We had a paranormal group come in one time to just investigate, bringing in all their equipment. They set up some cameras and other sound equipment, and after that was set up, we went away to dinner and came back and found out that the camera had jiggled and then been turned off. And the other thing that was found was that on the film they found some orbs circling above this corner over here. So we haven't had, an actual sighting of a ghost, but apparently some activity occurring in this building.
There's a ghost story that involves another local building.
The Chamber of Commerce is in what used to be Victoria's house at 420 Jerry Street. Victoria was kind of a socialite of the early days of Castle Rock. She was a teacher and then later on a seamstress. There's a couple of stories with Victoria. She was married as a young woman, and the tragedy was that when she was 8 months pregnant, her husband was shot in a hunting accident. So a few years later she did remarry, and her second husband and she lived in that house. But apparently she still likes to stay there because folks who are occupying the chamber say that occasionally if something is put where she doesn't like it, it gets moved. And also sometimes the doors get shut and you might be in a conference room and then you can't get out for a while until she lets the door open. So those are kind of the tales of her.
The next happening is at a place you might expect to be haunted, a funeral parlor. The funeral parlor was torn down and rebuilt. It's now known as the Ollinger Andrews Caldwell Gibson Funeral Home.
Now another little ghost that we have, story that we just found out a few years ago. We toured the old funeral parlor, which was on the corner, before it was about to be torn down. At the time, the funeral director and his family lived in the upstairs, and they told us about a ghost in their house they called Bob. And at the top of the stairs, they lived on the second floor, there was a closet. And that closet had a light in it, and sometimes they would come home and find the door open and the light on when they knew they hadn't left it that way. Apparently he was a fairly friendly ghost, but they did notice a few things going on in their house.
Next, Angie says there are spooky occurrences at a Castle Rock restaurant.
They've noticed that things got moved, like chairs in the dining room area. I've talked to a chef that used to work there, and he said that knives and plates and things would be dropped on the floor in the kitchen. And the last item was that there was a young girl on the stairs to the choir loft in white.
From Schleppies at the Old Stone Church to a tragic tale at another restaurant.
Well, there's a cafe in town called the B&B Cafe. It's been around for many, many years, and a favorite with many of the town folks. And we had a town marshal here in Castle Rock called Ray Lewis, and I found out his job was principally in the evening to go around and check that the businesses were locked and things were secure. But unfortunately, a few days earlier, a fellow came to town, had shot some policemen in Denver, and must have jumped the train and came down here. Well, he got hungry and went into the Castle Cafe, the B&B Cafe, and folks recognized him. So they called for the town marshal to come, but he didn't have a gun, and but the fellow who had shot the police did, and he killed the town marshal. Town marshal had a family of 4 children and lived in a small house around the corner from the museum here, and the community got together and enlarged his house so that his family could remain in that house.
Angie says a showdown led to a shootout at B&B Cafe.
Manuel Perez was accused of shooting policemen in Denver, and he escaped but managed to jump a train and come to Castle Rock. After a couple days he was pretty hungry, so he went into the B&B Cafe, which at the time was open 24 hours a day, which is kind of surprising because today some of the businesses all close at 5. And anyway, a lot of the locals were sitting in there and they recognized him. The item had been in the paper and they recognized him. So they called for the town marshal, which is probably doing his rounds in the evening, checking on the businesses to make sure that they were closed. And he went in and he was going to try to arrest him, but the perpetrator pulled out a gun and killed him. And then the people in the cafe actually got together and grabbed him. One of the bystanders got shot, I think, in his hand, and but the people were very angry, and so they actually took him out to the courthouse, and they were going to string him up on one of the cottonwood trees there. Fortunately, the sheriff got there in time and put an end to that, but we had a loss of our town marshal.
Angie tells us the date of the crime.
Occurred in 1946.
Museum Director Angie lets us know more about the crime.
If you visit the B&B Cafe today, there's still a bullet hole in the ceiling and a bullet hole in the counter behind the counters.
Next, there's a story about a ghost haunting the railroad.
Okay, this is a story of a ghost that was seen on the railroad tracks that serve the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe, and those tracks are on the west side of Castle Rock. And this occurred in 1891 when the railroad used only telegraphs to communicate. So the Denver station office received a garbled message from a site they called AZ. They were confused because there was no site called AZ. After a while, they ungarbled the message, which read, "I was a telegrapher who at one time worked in New York State, and in 1848-49 caught the gold fever and came west. As I said, I drank considerable, and one night in a drunken brawl, I was killed on the old Pueblo Trail, a few miles from what is now Palmer Lake on the Continental Divide. My spirit has roamed about, and until I make known the cause of my death, I cannot rest in my grave. The telegraph pole from which I am sending this is planted directly over my grave, the butt of the pole resting on my breast. 2 Denver operators decided to see if it was a prank or if they could find the pole. They found what they thought was the haunted pole. Before long, they felt a strange feeling come over them. From the bottom of the hole they were watching came a dim blue light. A white vapor arose, which gradually took on the form of a man while holding a telegraph key in his right hand. At the same time, Denver Station received this message: "Your 2 investigators are here. They have seen me. Farewell to Earth. I have been seen and heard. I am satisfied. Goodbye. H. from the Rocky Mountain News."
Next, there's a ghost story at a historic building.
Well, the Cantrell School is one of the oldest buildings in town. At first there was built a wooden structure and that burned down, and then they rebuilt it in 1897, and they have a ghost there they call Matilda. They hear her footsteps and the doors slamming.
Although Matilda is known as a friendly ghost, I left the Castle Rock Museum and went to explore the Parker Fall Festival. Activities offered included a pumpkin maze, playing carnival games, limboing, playing checkers, or playing hockey. I met Lindsay at the Parker Fall Festival. Lindsay told a ghost story of her own.
Last night, we were looking at the full moon, and we have owls, and you could hear the owls calling, and they're like all over. And all of a sudden we heard like not an owl, but it sounded like a person trying to make an owl sound, like really close to us, yeah. And then on the other side of us, another one, and I think it was foxes today, in the light of day, not at night, in the dark. I think it was a fox, but it was really scary last night, and we went inside.
Lindsay tells us some of her favorite fall foods and beverages.
Iced chai pumpkin spice tea, and we always make pumpkin banana bread. I like making acorn squash, and you put butter and brown sugar in it. It's really good. We do chili, because you know football season, Fritos and chili go together super well. We love it. And we usually get the turkeys at our house in the fall, so we throw corn out for the turkeys.
Remember, the greatest treasures are the memories along the way. For Treasure Expeditions, I'm Terri Saunders.